Welcome everyone to today's video where I'll be guiding you through the normal version of the 0 hour secret mission and helping you beat it solo. I thought, well, I already made a solo guide for the Whisper secret mission and the Shattered Throne dungeon, so let's continue that trend with one of my favorite missions in the game. On PC, your loadout is a lot more flexible in terms of things you can get away with using in endgame content, but on console you don't really have that luxury all the time, and as an Xbox player, I thought I'd give you some loadout recommendations and advice for each encounter to help you tackle this challenging mission as a one-man or one-woman army. 0 hour, like the Whisper mission, is no joke. 50 levels above the recommended power and the enemies still kick your ass. Not to mention you've got jumping puzzle sections and an intense boss fight, all while under the pressure of a 20-minute timer. These secret missions are some of the most challenging content in the game for solo players, and in order to conquer them, you're going to need the right tools for the job. So the run you're seeing is of my Titan's solo clear, and as we go through the mission, I'm going to give some advice on how to approach encounters on different classes. Your experience in this mission will vary depending on what class you choose, such as running Night Stalker, which can make any group of enemies really easy to deal with. But for the most part, things will be pretty similar across all classes, and your strategies will only diverge a little bit. I chose to run this on a Titan, and even though everyone says Titan supers aren't the best in the game, that's not always true, and with the right exotic, we can squeeze a lot of power out of these supers. If you're a hunter, you should be running the classic top tree Night Stalker with the exotic boots Orpheus rigs. Even after the multiple nerfs, they're still pretty darn good. If you're a Warlock, you've got a lot of options and a lot of good supers, and most of them work pretty well. Things like bottom tree Dawnblade, top tree Nova Bomb, and Nova Warp even, and Well of Radiance for the final encounter is also pretty good. And as a Titan, I'd suggest going with bottom tree Sentinel and using the exotic gauntlets Doomfang Pauldron. On its own, the Sentinel super may not be incredibly strong, but with Doomfang, you basically get infinite super if you know how to use it. Shh, don't tell Bungie they missed this one. When it comes to setting up armor, if you have any of the Fallen mods from Scourge of the Past, those are going to be really important for 0 hour, and I'll guarantee that the single most useful thing you could bring in this entire mission is Fallen Armaments, the mod that grants you heavy ammo on grenade kills. If you don't have an armaments mod like I didn't in this video, don't let it discourage you. This is still totally possible without one. It's just going to be a little bit tougher. Your best option if you don't have this mod is to wear armor that has heavy ammo finder on it. Even though these ammo perks are inconsistent, they can definitely make a difference. I would also recommend stacking up on special ammo finders for this, and if you can, you'll also want a fusion rifle scavenger perk and a machine gun scavenger perk. The reason you want both of these is because this is what our loadout is going to look like. I made a poll the other day on my channel whether or not I should make this video, and I also asked for suggestions on loadouts for a solo 0 hour clear. And after testing a bunch of different weapons and exotics, this is hands down my favorite one and the one that made this the easiest to solo. There are a million other good options, things like arbalist and bows and grenade launchers, but honestly this setup felt miles above anything else. In the primary slot, I'm running a scout rifle. You could also substitute this for a pulse rifle with some really good range, although some enemies might just be barely out of it. I decided to go with the trusty scout Nameless Midnight that has explosive payload and triple tap. Our special weapon is going to be Jotun, the Black Armory fusion rifle. Now this thing may not be the most OP exotic in the game right now, but it's going to change your life in this mission. It can demolish enemies with shields of any element, and it does a serious number on the boss, his servitors, and the fallen tanks. It feels like Jotun was made for this mission, and thank you to everyone who suggested trying it out. In our power slot, or our heavy slot if you're from D1, 21% Delirium is going to be our best pick for today. Originally, I tried taking in things like Wendigo and Swarm of the Raven, since grenade launchers are just so insane right now, and they were pretty good for most of the mission, but they were definitely some things they couldn't do as well as machine guns could. 21% Delirium also has a few advantages over other machine guns that make it such a good pick for this activity. First off, it's arc, and there are a ton of arc shielded enemies in this entire mission, and secondly, it has killing tally, which essentially is a rampage that lasts forever as long as you don't reload or switch weapons. Not to mention, this thing can hold a ton of ammo even without reserve perks. Thanks for all the suggestions everyone, and thank you for taking the time to vote in the poll. Now this might seem like an odd loadout at first glance, and you might question, are scouts really worth using in the current state of the game? Or if you really should put down that Wendigo for a minute even though everybody's raving about grenade launchers right now, including me. Just trust me on this one, give this setup a try and it'll work out really good. Alright, weapons are locked and loaded and armor is modded, and we're ready to visit Mithrax at the farm to begin the mission. So for this first encounter, you want to try and use your void grenades to pop the Shank's shields, and if you're lucky, you can stun the captains. If you place your first grenade right next to this captain on the right, sometimes he'll actually dodge out of the way and fall off the cliff, which is great for us. It means we don't have to spend any extra time fighting him, and that also saves us some ammo. Watch out for the stealth vandals because they will rush you not long after you jump into this encounter, so be ready for them. If you mow them down with Delirium, this can help you stack up killing tally, which will help you take down the sniper Shanks, the remaining captain, and it'll also help you burst through the Shank's shields quicker. The faster you get through these early encounters, the more time you're going to have for the boss, and that is your #1 concern right now, saving as much time as humanly possible in these first few rooms. You can't really get hung up this early on, or you might as well restart. The second area has a bit more enemies, so what I like to do is start by taking out some of the arc shielded Shanks to the left of the room, and then clear out the Shanks behind this hut. And then I can use this hut as cover from the snipers to take them out and use Jotun on the heavy Shank to the left. Your primary should be fine for taking out the sniper Shanks, but if you're loaded on special ammo finders, you can burn them real quick with Jotun to save time. After they're down, I like to head around to the right of the hut and pop a grenade between the two vandals and the heavy Shank. And if you want to be safe, you can hang back and use the hut as cover, but since I've done this so many times, I have a feel of how the enemies react here and how to stay alive, although my grenade didn't quite land as perfectly as I wanted it to, so the vandals were kind of up for a little too long. If you can take out the arc Shanks with Delirium and the heavy Shanks with Jotun, you should be able to knock out this encounter with close to 18 minutes left on the clock. So you want to aim for the first 2 rooms cleared in about 2 minutes. Be sure to scavenge for any heavy ammo or special ammo also before you move on. The next encounter is the second hardest room in the entire fight. The Hangar Area has a ton of enemies, everything from snipers to void servitors and solar Shanks, and a spider tank. So the best way to approach this is by first taking out all the Vandal snipers and the sniper Shanks that you possibly can from your starting area. You should be able to get them all if you peek around the corner, just watch because sometimes there's a Shank there waiting for you. If you need to, take out the closest Shanks with Jotun and clear out the rest of the snipers since they'll rip you a new one if you leave them standing. What I also like to do is after taking out each of the snipers is hop up on the crates here and take out any solar Shanks down below on the hangar floor, as well as any that are really close near me. If you can clear out a bunch of stragglers and enemies that are really far away from the rest of the group before you go in with your super, it's going to make clearing this room a lot easier. And after that, you want to use your super. So hunters should tether in kind of the middle of all these enemies here. Warlock should either Nova Warp or Nova Bomb as many as you can, trying to take out the servitors since they're the biggest pains here. And the nice thing about Doomfang Pauldron for Titans is they extend your super by a long time as long as you're getting hits with your shield once you've thrown it. So just keep throwing your shield over and over trying to aim at the enemies and you should be able to extend your super long enough to clear out everything in this room but the tank. I like to run up to the servitors and throw a shield and then do the right trigger attack twice to kill them, and then continue bouncing the shield off every enemy in the room. You can actually bounce the shield off the tank too to extend your super, but I would definitely recommend focusing on the servitors first. If you've got your tether back from the group of enemies, you can either use it here on the 2 servitors, or you can use it in the next room. Both are equally good strategies. If all the enemies are dead, then I'll go to town with the machine gun, making sure to save some ammo for the next room since there's a captain there. And then I like to follow up with some Jotun. I don't know why the tank explosion killed me here. It usually doesn't, but you might want to stay a little farther back than I was just to make sure you don't die, since dying really sets you back. And while it did cost me some time, it did allow me a chance to scope out the area for some ammo. Sadly, there wasn't any here, but definitely keep an eye out when you're killing the Vandal snipers in the beginning, because sometimes they can drop heavy ammo on top of the raised platforms, and you don't want to miss out on that. The next room is pretty straightforward. I just recommend taking out every enemy before you step too far into it. There's hardly any cover here, and the enemies focus you super hard, so I like to take out the dregs and the vandals from a distance, and then peek around the corner and pop the heavy shank with Jotun. Now, the rest of this section is just a few enemies here and there. Clear them out as quickly as possible and make sure not to leave any stragglers, because you need to kill every single last enemy to be granted access to the jumping puzzle. If you've got your super here, use it just to blast through everything as fast as you can. At the end of this section, I usually switch to my lion rampants to make my time in the jumping puzzle easier. Transversive steps for warlocks and stompies for hunters are also options to consider, but lion rampants is a game changer here, and I would 100% recommend powering through the console load times to equip them if you're a Titan. From here until we get to Trevor is just the jumping section, so there's no real need for commentary until we get close to him. Just try and relax and not think too hard about each jump. Avoiding death is really crucial here, because even one will set you back a lot of time. Good luck on this section, and I'll catch back up with you at the time on the screen. So Trevor's maze is pretty low stakes, but I put together this graphic showcasing the fastest route to take by yourself. And the best thing about this route is you're never going to run into Trevor at all. You're basically following him around the first corner, and then taking the first left and hitting the bottom left switch, then the top left switch, And once you've hit those 2 switches, you're going to turn around and backtrack until you get to the middle pit area. You're going to jump across it and then go right. You can then take the first left here again to get to the bottom switch, turn around again and then go up to the top switch and then exit the maze. This path of bottom left switch, top left switch, jumping across middle, then the bottom right switch and top right switch is going to make sure you're never going to run into Trevor and can always get through this in one go. From here until the final boss room is just some simple running through some really cool areas, so again I'll cut the comms until we're there. The boss fight in 0 Hour is really hectic, and if you lose your rhythm here, you can get caught in a cycle of death and frustration. In order to prevent that, here's how I approach it. Oh yeah, and make sure to switch back to your normal exotics once you get here. As soon as I drop down into the boss arena, I'll take out a fair amount of the close by dregs and snipers. After you've eliminated these nearby threats, you can drop down onto whatever side you're most comfortable on and take out the fallen turret with Jotun. Jotun's tracking doesn't actually work on these turrets, so you'll have to make sure to aim directly at them. After a few shots, they should go down, and then you have some options. The safest one being that you transition to the other side of the room and drop down and take out the other turret and the other sniper. I was playing it a little risky and tried to hop up on top of these platforms, which almost was a really bad idea, unless of course you have a Well of Radiance, then you'll be fine. Once you do some damage to the boss, your first servitor is going to spawn. Hunters should tether the servitor, and wearing rigs, you should get it back for the next one. The tether should allow you to kill all the shanks and the servitors with Jotun pretty easily. Titans should pop their sentinel shield and do exactly what they did before, throwing shields at everything. It's going to get a bit weird trying to hit the servitor in midair. Just remember to keep throwing shields to extend that super. If you're able to keep bouncing shields off enemies, you can clear both servitors and 3 groups of shanks with your super alone, meaning you can cause the tanks to spawn in pretty soon. Now that I think about it, this is actually probably easier on a Titan ever since the Skull of Ahamkara nerf, isn't it? Warlocks can either use Nova Bomb or Well of Radiance to survive, but if you're using Well, make sure you've got Phoenix Protocol equipped, because it's going to get you back your super pretty fast. Once you scare the boss off again, you can clean up some of the stealth vandals roaming around, or go straight in for the tanks. Be mindful that killing a few of those enemies seems to trigger another group of Arc Shanks to spawn in, but if you have some heavy, they shouldn't be a huge issue. Make sure to be aware of all the enemies around you so that you don't get gunned down by some random group of Shanks and then have to run all the way back. Now there are a few different ways to approach shooting the tanks, and previously the safest way was to sit all the way in the back of the room with Whisper, but since you don't get infinite ammo anymore, what we're going to do is hop up right next to the tank and shoot it from here. Sitting right against the wall, you can use one tank as cover from the second tank, and also as cover from the boss. Once the tank is about to explode, you can either stick it out or back up to be safe. And then you've got to go on to the second tank. And you basically want to do the exact same thing. If I had cleared out this turret initially, I wouldn't have had to worry about the tank right behind it. So that definitely would have been a smart move to do earlier. You'll notice I'm keeping that shank alive near the boss, and the reason for that is because if you kill all the red bar enemies that spawn in with the boss, he'll spawn in another wave. So in order to not have to fight loads more enemies, always try and keep at least one enemy alive. In my run, I had a few enemies alive, and honestly I should have either shot the shank down or taken down one of the snipers, because they were messing me up pretty bad, and it's kind of difficult to do damage when they're all looking at me. If you're at this point, it's all in on damage. Use Delirium and Jotun and hit the boss really hard. Jotun does so much damage, it's crazy, so if you can find some ammo laying around, that scavenger perk is going to really come in handy. I did have to make a suicide run in this fight to get some ammo, which you might have to do sometimes, but it is worth it if you really need that ammo. Just remember to scavenge around first before you go jumping in and dying. Remember throughout this fight, if you have fallen armaments, to use your grenade to kill enemies and get heavy. That's going to be invaluable here. But otherwise, from this point on, it's really all about damaging the boss and cleaning up the 1 or 2 enemies that you left behind. On a solo run, you're going to be cutting this really close. So the more you can stay alive, the better, since you need every single second to kill things and do damage. Use cover as much as you possibly can and keep an eye on the ammo drops, since unfortunately ammo is really kind of the deciding factor in all of this. If you play smart though and you're quick, you can beat this mission solo. I believe in you. These challenges are some of the most adrenaline pumping and frustrating things to try and do in this game, but it feels incredible to actually beat these things solo. I do wish there were some very special emblems or triumphs for doing more things solo, because I think it's really cool. If you found this guide helpful, I would really appreciate if you could share it to others and maybe consider subscribing. If you do, Turn on notifications so you don't miss out on new guides for all of the Destiny 2 content. I'm always pretty quick at getting in-depth guides out for the newest stuff, and not to mention you get guides like this. Thanks everyone for your time, and have a great day.